You're listening to Back Pew Convos.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Sal. And this is the podcast God wants you to listen to.
So if you want to remain in God's will, have a sit down.
Grab a beverage of your choice.
And have a listen.
You're welcome.
I mean, you actually said something. You said that if your view of God is that of judge, it makes sense. I don't even think it makes sense in that, under that circumstance, because like a judge is beholding to the law.
Right.
God is God.
Right. If God wrote
He makes the law.
Yeah, I agree. That's not necessarily what I meant with that. I just meant from the sole purpose of like, oh, my hands are tied. I'm just the judge. I can, like he's not.
Right.
But yeah, even in the macro sense, like looking at it from above, like he's who wrote the law. That's kind of always been my crux of the whole thing. The logic argument is like, well, God doesn't want to punish you, but he's got to. But he who made the rules? Or like who made the hell? And you know what I mean? Like that's what I meant when I said like it's like me trying. Well, I didn't choose to live on Earth. I want to live on Mars. Well, too bad. Like it's not a choice.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I can't choose hell if it didn't exist. Somebody had to create it.
Yeah.
Or like the law, I'm not beholden to the law without the person who wrote the law. So you can't just tell me, oh, I'm sorry. Like, no, you're the one that wrote the law.
Exactly. Yeah, it all comes back to, that's why I said what I said earlier about whatever we say about the end of all things, we're saying about God, because he set this whole thing in motion. He created. If hell's something in creation, if it's a created thing, if it's a thing at all, it was created. And it had to have been created by him. And to me, the idea that because here's the thing. One pushback that people have against universal salvation is that they don't think that people that hold to this view take sin seriously enough.
Right. That's As somebody who labels himself a universalist, I've heard that one before.
But here's the thing. I actually think that those that believe in eternal conscious torment don't take sin seriously enough.
Right. I would agree.
Because under the eternal conscious torment view, God allows sin to remain part of his good creation for all of eternity. No, man. This is where I think the annihilationists have a point, at least.
Yeah.
I'll give them a point over the eternal conscious torment in that, at least in annihilation, it's completely wiped out. Like, sin and evil don't get to exist eternally in God's creation under annihilation.
Yeah, and I think that's one that we haven't really given enough time in this conversation is the annihilation view, because I mean neither one of us hold to that point of view. Right. But if I was to rank them, I would put that's more plausible than eternal conscious torment to me, at least. I mean, and I think it comes down to, for me, just like even though I do sin, I'm not my sin. Yeah. And so to say that I am annihilated with my sin is to equate me with my sin. You know what I'm saying? So like, that's where I make the separation. But I do, to your point, I do think that it makes more sense than eternal conscious torment.
Yeah, well, especially at this point of like the seriousness of sin, because like because I would assume that those in hell for eternity are continuing to sin, otherwise they wouldn't. I don't know why they would continue to be there.
Right.
I don't know. Like that doesn't make sense to me that God would allow.
So what you're saying is they're having a great time. Kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, what's funny enough is there are some people, because people know that eternal conscious torment seems crazy. It doesn't seem just, it doesn't seem loving. Because there are people that understand that, there is certain people that will formulate a version of hell that actually sounds like a good freaking time if you're a sinner. like the Jerry, I think the guy's name is Jerry Walls, talks about basically he says that because true joy and fulfillment only comes through Christ, that those in hell will experience a sort of like a false sense of joy and pleasure, but it's not real because it's not found in Jesus. But what that sounds like to me is that people in hell are just kind of partying, sinning all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird concept to think about because, like, it's almost like whatever you, in a weird way, whatever you perceive is reality. So, like, if I feel like I'm having a good time, that means I'm having a good time. Like, there's no other way about it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. I mean, people are doing LSD and having orgies in hell,
you can tell me, even though I feel like I'm having a good time, and you can be over my right shoulder saying, "Bro, you're not really having a good time." I'm like, it feels like I'm having a pretty good time right now. Like,
yeah, I mean, a lot of people that engage in those sort of activities would say that they're having a good time.
Yeah,
it's fun in the moment. You know, it may end up leaving them feeling empty in the long run.
Right, and that's to get a little bit serious about it. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
You know, that's sort of how I feel about it. Really, is like when people want to talk about if we're taking sin seriously or not.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm talking about. Really. It's like in the here and now. Like, I can experience hell now.
Yeah.
I feel like I probably have to a certain extent. I think we all have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And to be honest, like, I've lived a pretty privileged life. I know that. Like,
right.
You know, and I acknowledge that. So, like, I haven't experienced near the hell that some other people have.
Right. Yeah.
But that goes back to what me and you were saying at the beginning about how we can either experience it now and let that burn those parts away from us now, or later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, either way, the love of God is going to burn that away.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to. I think it has to.
And I think you want it to. I want it to. Man, like,
yeah.
As a follower, like, that's what I want. Like,
right.
Even if it is painful.
Yeah.
That's sort of I mean, you know, we could go on forever and ever, but like, that's sort of at the crux of what Jesus taught us, right? Like, it's not easy. It's going to be painful. I suffered this, so you're going to have to suffer. You're going to have to take up your cross too.
Take up your cross and follow me.
It's going to be painful. Like, that's kind of the point.
If you follow Jesus, it inevitably leads to a cross.
Yeah.
To follow Jesus is to go to the cross.
So this idea that, like, just because we have, and this is the way I kind of like to describe it to people, especially people who aren't universalists, or, you know, is just because I have hope that God really is that good. Just because I have hope doesn't mean I don't take sin seriously. I definitely do.
Yeah.
To your point, I would even argue in certain circles, maybe more seriously than others.
Right.
But ultimately, what it comes down to at the very baseline is I just have hope.
Yeah.
Like, I hope that God is more loving than I could ever imagine. I hope that God is more forgiving than I can ever imagine. I hope. I have hope. I hope that all things are restored in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, is that so bad? Like,
no.
Really? Like,
no, I mean, I would say mine is more than hopeful, though. I would say I'm pretty confident.
I mean, I'm definitely confident. I don't want to say that I'm not, but at the baseline, like, shouldn't we all just be hopeful?
Yes, we should. Yeah. I think Scripture calls us to pray for the salvation of all. There's actually, in the early church, there is tradition of people praying for those who are in the lake of fire. Like, that's a thing. Like, why would the people in the early church be praying for those in the lake of fire if there's no possibility of them getting out of there? And isn't that the right response? Isn't it the Christ-like, the Christ-like response? The God who is love, agape love specifically, other-centered, self-sacrificing love that Jesus displayed perfectly by going to the cross to die for everyone. Isn't it exactly that response that is required of all of us? That if there's even one person outside the city in the lake of fire, we have a responsibility as those who are followers of Christ to say, like, this is something I've thought about. Like, as long as one person remains outside, all of us should be saying, I'll go.
Yeah.
Let them come in here. I'll go. Because that's what Christ does.
Well, and you know what? That's funny that you say that, because that's even something I mean, it's a silly example, right? But I'm a football coach. I'm an assistant football coach at the local high school. That's one of the things that our kids get right off the bat is whenever there is somebody who is getting disciplined and they have to run after practice because they're being disciplined, they say, "Let me run with them." Right. Like, because if I have to, because that's lucky enough because I'm such a bad ace dude. Right, I'm in charge of the discipline, so I get to set a certain number of runs for them, across the field and back. That's one. You got 10 of those bad boys. So I'll have other players come up to me. I'm going to run one for them. Will you take one off if I do that? Again, I was kidding about being hard because I'm pretty soft, and ultimately every time I'm like, yeah, of course I'll take one off. If you're going to run one for your teammate, I'll take one off. And that's the same principle, right? Like, no, if there's one person left outside, let me go get them. Let me help them. Let me, whatever I've got to do. I mean,
I mean, I want to go back, I think, to...
We can go wherever you want, bro.
I want to go back to the sin issue because it's important. It really is that important. I want to make sure that this point gets across.
What is sin? No, let's don't go there for now.
That's a whole
episode. But that's my favorite question to ask, by the way,
because I mean it's one that if you haven't thought about it, it can be tricky.
Not to distract from the conversation here, but that's my two favorite questions are what is sin, and then what is salvation. Those are my two favorite questions. But anyway, go back to sin. You go.
Well, all I'm saying is, the more seriously you take sin, I think the more universal salvation is the inevitable conclusion of it. Because, like, for example, I'll give an example from someone in history, Anselm.
Yep.
He was around 1000 AD.
A minute ago.
Old guy. Not like as old as the guys I mentioned earlier, but like old.
Yeah.
Right. This is where he's kind of picking up from Augustine, but then Anselm kind of is really where like the roots of the penal substitutionary atonement theory comes from. Calvin picks up from Anselm, and then the theory as we have it today really was finalized by Calvin.
I can't wait till we talk about atonement theories, by the way.
Yeah. But like Anselm, what he actually said that Calvin later takes up and kind of like changes a smidge is that even the smallest sin against the infinite majesty of God is worthy of an infinite punishment. So, that's probably as serious as you can take sin, right?
Yeah.
Smallest...
Sounds pretty serious.
The smallest, tiniest sin against the infinite majesty of God has required infinite punishment.
So it's like saying 1 grain of salt in the whole ocean.
Yeah.
Contaminates the whole thing.
Exactly.
Worthy of... All right.
So that's about as serious as you can take sin, right? Anselm goes on to say, it's precisely because finite creatures like ourselves are incapable.
Mm-hmm.
We are incapable of paying that infinite price. Is precisely why Jesus comes to the cross to die for us all. So take sin as seriously as you want. We are incapable of meeting the demands of justice required if you take it that seriously.
Right.
That's why Christ did it for everyone. And that's why Calvin has to come up with this idea of a limited atonement because, well, if Christ died for everyone, everyone is saved.
Right. I think that what you just said in a nutshell really is a perfect way of formulating this whole ideology. Right, which is, I take sin seriously.
Yeah.
I just take Christ's sacrifice more seriously.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of what I heard from that whole thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
exactly. And that's exactly what I would say. Because, again, the charge against universal salvation is those who hold to that view, the charge against them is You don't take sin seriously enough. And I would respond with, you don't take Christ's sacrifice on the cross serious enough.
Amen. We're preaching now.
I mean, did he die once for everyone or not?
Right.
Game over.
Mic drop. I don't even have a response. Like, it's it.
I mean, if you take sin, that's what I'm saying. Like, the more, I don't care if you hold to like the strictest penal substitution, like, take sin as seriously as you want. The more seriously you take sin and the ugliness of it and what it does to the terrible, like what it does to God's creatures and creation, the more seriously you take that, man, the more you need to be insistent that God rectifies it in the end.
Right. And I guess
for everyone.
And I guess ultimately the end goal of this isn't just to, like, I still feel like most people hear the arguments that we're making and they're like, well, you're just trying to justify like doing whatever you want to do.
No.
Right?
That's
like,
ridiculous.
I know it is ridiculous to us, but I still feel like that's the only argument that I ever get. Is like you just want to justify like doing whatever you want to do, right? I mean, I don't think I've made any qualms about it. Like, I believe that Galatians 5:14 is my motto. The fullness of the law is fulfilled in loving your neighbor as yourself. There is no law. There is no rules to follow. It's simply loving your neighbor as yourself. That's the only thing that we have to do. And the only pushback I get back to that is you just want to justify doing whatever you want to do. Like, you just want to justify sin, right? Like, so, I mean, I don't know. What do you...
I mean, that is at the crux of what I think Jesus is doing at the cross, though. He is, if you love your neighbor as yourself, you will go to whatever means necessary to love them the way that you would want to be loved.
Right.
Like, and that meant Jesus going to a cross. While we were sinners, Christ, he demonstrates his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, he died for us. Like, I don't know, greater love hath no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. That's what, to love your neighbor as yourself is to love people with a agape, other-centered,
right,
self-sacrificing love that was, again, that Jesus displayed to perfection on the cross. Right. So, for someone to say, like, if you lay that scripture out and you're like, that's my go-to, and then someone be like, oh, you just went, like, that's ridiculous. That's the opposite of it. It's because that points you to the cross.
Right.
God is love, right? If we believe that God loves everyone the same, if God loves... this kind of gets into how we define sin, but if the victim and victimizer are both loved by God equally, then eternal punishment of the victimizer cannot be the end. If God loves both parties equally,
right,
then healing and reconciliation of both parties involved has to be the end.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think that this is. I think that we have to insist that no one gets a free ride. Like, I think that the ways that we don't love our neighbor as ourselves need to be answered for. The things that... the evil that I do to the people around me, that needs to be answered for. I need to answer for that.
Right.
And the ways that I've been hurt by other people, that needs to be rectified. That needs to be healed. I need to be healed of that hurt and that pain. And the person that caused that hurt needs to understand the ways in which they've hurt me. And this is a two-way street. It's... everyone has been victimized, or everyone has been victim of hurt, of not treating each other the way that they should have been treated.
Hey, you speak for yourself, bro. No, I'm kidding.
So, like...
I'm definitely guilty, obviously.
So, that's why I say, like, the punishment is only part of it. it's a means to which it's corrective. It's for the purposes of correction. It's for the purpose of ultimately healing and restoring and reconciling both parties, both the victim and victimizer.
Man, and we're a minute or an hour and a half into this thing, and I just now, because you said that, it reminded me of a totally another topic that will distract us for another half an hour.
Well, let's hear it.
It's because, like, depending on what your view of hell is, because you were talking about healing, right?
Yeah.
And how healing requires something, right?
Yeah.
There has to be something there. But the modern conception of the salvation from hell is just believe the right things, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of just distracted, or that's the thought that came to my mind was how the belief aspect of it comes in, and how we can't control belief.
Yeah.
Like, there's certain things I know that's always the argument that you hear against it. There's certain things you can do, right? What kind of are you reading your scriptures every day? Are you listening to K-Love every day? Like, what are you doing?
Right.
There's certain things you can do to strengthen your belief, but ultimately, like, obviously I didn't come up with this on my own, but I heard somebody say it one time. But, like, if that's truly how you believe it works, then start believing in Thor. Can you believe Thor's the real true God? Like, it sounds ridiculous when you say it.
Right.
Because obviously, I think that God is God. Like, I can't just believe that Thor's God. Okay, well, then you can't determine what you believe. That's not how belief works. So this idea that I'm going to be damned to hell, or somebody else is going to be damned to hell for all of eternity, suffering, again, all these terrible things that we've already discussed in this episode, based on you just didn't believe the right things. That's not just. Like, that goes back to the words have to mean something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think it is a process of correction, and it's a process of healing. There are plenty of things that I believe that are probably wrong, and those things need to be corrected.
Yeah.
But that I think that actually may be something altogether different. Like that, if we're talking about right doctrines.
Yeah, I just meant, and the reason why it came up to me in my mind when you were reading that is because you were talking about actual healing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And just believing something doesn't, like...
Yeah. And that language might sound odd to some people. I guess I forget sometimes, like, we've both had so much change.
Right.
That, like, even using the terminology of healing in terms of hell is probably really weird for some people. And it is healing in terms of talking about it in terms of sin as a sickness that needs healing, is foreign probably to some people. I've been influenced a lot by Eastern Orthodoxy, and that's how they view it. Primarily, if I understand right, from people that I've heard from that tradition, that's how they view sin. It's a sickness. It's not. It needs healing. It's not. It's like a terminal disease that we have, and the thing is that Jesus, the great physician, comes and heals all of humanity.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that with the kind of the descriptions that me and you have both used in this episode of how we conceptualize hell, as burning away the, wood, hay, and stubble or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that's all metaphor for sickness or whatever. It's all the same, like, it all works together to be ultimately the same thing. I mean, that's, again, another one of those things I've noticed when I've been reading, in this read through, and I'm in John, and I'm just like, man, sometimes Jesus just really, for my ignorant mind, makes no sense. But because he's using all these metaphors and this language, and it's hard. But,
it is hard. The Bible's hard, but
no, it's clear. The Bible is clear.
It says it. The plain reading,
yes,
is always right. Something else I wanted to make sure that we made mention of was the total victory. Because that's the other thing. We sing a lot of songs about He's never lost a
Yeah.
battle, right?
Right.
Who are you, great mountain? You should not bow low. Jesus is completely and totally victorious over Satan, sin, and death at the cross, right? That's what...
Allegedly.
So what does a total and complete victory over Satan, sin, and death look like?
Yeah.
If not, salvation for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, that's, to be honest, it's kind of funny that it's taken us this long to come around to that topic, because that is actually something that factored in for me pretty heavily.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but if that's true, then God's kind of the loser here. Like,
right.
He's lost more than he's won.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers go to Satan for sure, right?
Exactly. Like, that's what I meant. Like, it's just, you know, if souls won is the unit of measurement that we're using here, then he's not undefeated by a long shot. That's a losing record.
Jesus's victory is reduced to a sort of moral victory at that point. It's not even like a true victory over Satan, sin, and death. Because if even, and that's true, I think, if even one person, it's not a total and complete victory. He lost that battle.
Yeah.
The battle for, I don't know, I'm not going to start naming names. I started to start naming names like Hitler and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If there's even one human being, even one person that God created at the end, then for one thing, that person's will has defeated God's will.
Yeah.
And Satan, sin, and death have won that one. That one battle over that person's soul, they won that one. So you cannot speak about God's total and complete victory over Satan, sin, and death unless he is victorious over every single one.
Right. I think that you said something very important in there, whereas you said that somebody's will defeated God's will, right?
Yeah.
Because if God's will is that all shall be saved, but you're telling me, yeah, but free will. So then what you're saying is that my will beats God's will.
Right.
Right? Like if my free will, if God's will's for all to be saved, but my will says I don't want to be saved, then my will's stronger than God's will.
Yeah.
And that, ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to for us is, or I mean, I say us, I don't really want to speak for you, but I think I can. It's like it comes down to...
Probably.
It comes down to the fact that, like, I don't know how it's going to work out in the end, but I think that God's will wins every time.
Yeah.
He's undefeated. I truly believe he's undefeated.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that works, and I don't know the intricacies of it, but ultimately, again, that H word, I have hope, at least, at the very least, I have hope that his will is stronger than any other will, you know?
Yeah. Which that gets into the free will argument, which is... For me, I'll touch on this very quickly, and I'm going to say this, and it might sound a little abrasive.
Oh, please.
I got no time for it, though.
Bring it.
I have no time for the sort of the Calvinist notions of predestination that God has predetermined. Because if we're the free will defense, okay, I'll take it seriously and I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But if you believe that everyone's choices are determined, that no one has, if you believe in that sort of hard determinism, and you believe that God, then you believe that some people spend eternity in hell, you believe in predestination at that point. You believe that some people are predestined to go to hell.
Right.
And if you believe that God chose from the beginning, before anyone made any decisions, like, done anything, if you believe that God chose certain people to spend eternity in hell, and that God views those people, as Jonathan Edwards put it in his sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, if God views those people as a loathsome insect, as Jonathan Edwards put it, then you worship Satan.
I like it.
Your God is worse than Satan.
This is the one.
Oh, you worship Molech. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's not God.
Now you're talking like me.
Well, I mean, and I know that's strong language, but man, that is such an affront to God's character. It really is man, it's offensive to me.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm with you.
Because, again, whatever we say about the end of all things, we're saying about God's character and nature, and I don't want people talking about my God that way.
Yeah.
That's not worthy of God.
That, I mean, what you were just talking about there with the predestined thing, that's one thing that I don't... to be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time with it because it makes zero sense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to... It's like trying to understand where on the map I'm going to find Atlantis or, right. Wherever the place the Thundercats lived. I don't remember now. It's been
Thundercats.
Too long. But yeah, it just makes no sense to me. Like, I have spent no time with that because I don't even take it seriously.
Yeah, same. I got no time for it, and that's why I just brought it up really quick just to say, like, I'm not even going to address that.
Right.
But I do want to talk about the free will thing.
Yeah, I mean, the free will thing I think is an interesting one. I know that me and you have had plenty of conversations about just the concept of free will in and of itself. But as it relates to this topic for me, it always comes back to two things, which is, I mean, I guess it depends on how you conceptualize hell. But if we're talking about like somewhere you go after you die, like let's just say for the sake of this argument that when I use the word hell, I'm talking about eternal conscious torment, the place you go after you die to suffer, then that means something, as you had pointed out, something had to have created this place. There had to have been some sort of order that was established, or some sort of rule, or some sort of hierarchy that decided when you die, when a human dies, they either go here or they go here. But it's up to their free will to decide where they go. Well, I can't choose to go somewhere that was never created in the first place. So even just the fact that hell was created for that purpose, that I could even choose it, to me, in my view, again, using my typical strong language, makes God evil.
Right.
In my mind. I mean, and at the very least, it makes him a terrible father.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so... that's where the free will argument gets me, is like, I understand the desire to think that you have free will. It sounds good to have this conceptual, this idea that I can choose whatever I want to choose.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, I'm behind it. But I can't choose something that doesn't exist. I can't choose to live on Jupiter, or I can't choose to my hair to be green because I don't have any hair because I'm bald, thanks genetics. Like, you know what I'm saying though? Yeah. Like, I can't choose something that doesn't exist. That's not an option. If my options are A or B, I can't choose C because C's not an option.
Yeah.
So just the fact that C is an option taints who God is. So that's where the free will thing dies with me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to say about it. I think you hit it dead on whenever, and I mean, for me, this is dead on with everything, because like, I don't even know, like, the thinking about God as a perfect father is the only way anything makes sense to me. It's the only way that I've been able to make sense of anything, is to think about God as father.
Right.
So like, a father would allow, it's a good thing to allow your kids freedom, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Freedom to go out and experience life, and you don't want to shield your children from the consequences of things. Like, you end up with spoiled children that have never experienced life in any sort of way that prepares them.
Right.
If you shield them completely from any and all consequences of their actions.
Yeah. As a fairly new father, I can say, my son is 2.5, and I can say that that's sort of one of the trickiest parts of being a father.
Yeah.
Is trying to figure out, like,
I could see that.
I want him to learn from his actions, but at the same time, I don't want him to fall and hurt himself. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's that balance.
Because you want to protect him.
Right. I want him to learn, but I understand that it's my responsibility to protect him.
Yeah. Well, this free will thing, a lot of people, and I think that this is right and true. So like, people will say, like, well, God's a gentleman, right? And God is love, right? So 1 Corinthians 13 lays out a description of love, and it says that, love doesn't insist on its own way. So You know, because God is a gentleman and he doesn't insist on his own way. He'll let you have your way.
Right.
And that's fine. Fair enough. But keep reading, because it also says that love protects. So to protect, God has to have limitations in place on our freedom in order to protect us.
Right.
Therefore, to me, it would not make any sense to allow, because again, if you're continue with the father and child analogy, it's a good thing to have freedom, but you wouldn't allow your children the freedom to do irreparable harm to themselves.
Right.
Something that could not be undone.
Right. I want my son to learn that playing with sharp objects is dangerous, but I'm not going to leave him locked in a room with a knife by himself.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. and run the risk of him like cutting a main artery and dying and bleeding out.
Right.
You know, like you would not allow your children the risk, especially if you were able.
If I did do that, what would people say about me?
Well, you would be locked up.
Yeah, they would say I'm a terrible father. I would be locked. I would agree they're right. I would be labeled a terrible father. I'd be thrown in prison.
Yeah.
And all these things. And that's one of the things I always say is like, why do we hold ourselves as finite humans to a higher standard than we hold God? Like, but when we use these arguments, that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're saying like ultimately, if you put it in terms like that, like, well, it's God, so whatever. But like, if I was to do that, I would be thrown in jail and called a terrible father.
Exactly. Like, no, I mean like I said, love protects. So, what is love to do other than to put limitations in place that would inevitably lead every lost sheep home?
Right.
Like. Because the other thing, so that's one thing I would say about free will, right? Is that I think there has to be limitations in place because love protects, love wouldn't allow for there to not to be in like no limitations on your freedom. And some people might argue, well, yeah, for children you wouldn't do that, but for an adult, like adults go out and do whatever they want to do. But like. I don't buy that either, because like if Finn was a grown adult and say he had a gun to his head, what would you do? If you're standing right there and you see him right there in front of you with a gun to his head, what are you going to do?
I'd do anything I could to stop
You're going to do anything you could,
yeah.
even if it meant you got shot in the process and died.
Right.
That's what Jesus did.
Right. Absolutely.
That's exactly what Jesus did.
Right.
And he did it for everyone. So anyway, the other thing that some people will say with free will, or one thing that I would say, is that if you hold free will in that high regard, if you think that God holds our free will in such high regard that he would allow us to send ourselves to eternal conscious torment, then I would say that God holds our free will as an infinite value at that point.
Right.
So then why would it be taken away at the point of death?
Yeah, I don't know.
The freedom to choose.
It seems like that's one of the arbitrary measures that's always been used, and I don't know why. I don't know what the basis of it is. If somebody else knows, they can educate me. I don't know, but it's just always just kind of seemed like that's an arbitrary thing. It's like you have this life, and then once you die, it's over, and there's no the idea that you have free will after you die.
Do not pass go. Do not collect.
Yeah, it's like that idea doesn't even exist. I don't know, man. I don't know where that comes from, but
yeah, I mean, well, the Bible is not 100% clear on that. You know, there are scriptures here and there,
right? Which is pretty much how it is with
anything. Yeah. but again, if you're gonna use the free will argument and you're gonna say that like, if you take free will that seriously, I think you have to say that God wouldn't take it away from you. If it's that valuable to him,
right?
Why would he ever take it away? So then you're left with the sort of C.S. Lewis approach, basically. C.S. Lewis talks about hell as he says the gates are locked from the inside.
Yeah.
So, which implies what he's saying is that you can leave anytime you want, but no one ever will.
Right.
That they're just so lost in their sin that they never choose to. But you're halfway there.
Yeah.
Because then the question inevitably is, if you grant that, like, okay, well, yeah, because free will is so important to God, I don't think he would ever take it away. Yeah, sure, you can choose afterwards. We're talking about eternity. We're talking about infinite God. We're talking about a God who knows you so intimately that he would know exactly the circumstances necessary to bring you to your pigpen moment, to make you turn and come back.
Right.
You're talking about a God of infinite time, infinite resource, and infinite knowledge.
Right. Which I think ultimately comes back to the terminology we use in church all the time, right? His love never ends. What does that mean? Like, that means he will wait however long it takes. Which is weird to say for, I mean, it's even sort of metaphorical language, considering that I would conceptualize God as outside of time and space. But
yeah,
however long it takes, I'll wait forever. I will literally wait forever, which doesn't exist because that implies an end to time. But you know what I mean, like,
right? Well, I mean, if you're talking about, again, if we're talking about the infinite, we're talking about, I mean, again, we don't know what we're even talking about when
right.
we're talking about the infinite. But if we're talking about a God who has infinite time, resources, and knowledge, then the odds. So there's I can't remember. He's not like old. Not like a really early church figure. Pretty recent, really. I can't remember the time frame. But the guy's name is Hans Urs von Balthasar, and he wrote a book, Dare We Hope That All Be Saved, and he was a hopeful universalist.
Yeah,
he wasn't to the point of like saying we can confidently teach this, but he was hopeful. But he says that the odds of that never happening, the odds of everyone not having that pigpen moment, that prodigal son pigpen moment where they come to themselves and turn, the odds of that never happening for everyone are infinitely unlikely.
right.
So we can't say for sure, he says, but it's infinitely unlikely. Well, if words mean anything, again, if words mean something, then to say that something is infinitely unlikely is to say that, yeah, it's going to happen.
Right.
And that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I want to circle back a little bit for just a second to the C.S. Lewis thing, right? And the gates are locked from the inside out.
Yeah.
That goes back to what I was saying earlier about how we hold God to a lower standard at times than we hold humans, because like if that was to happen in earthly terms, all right, so like let's just say somebody chooses the option because they're free will, right? Mm-hmm. They have the option to choose, so they choose the option that is harmful to them.
Yeah,
we label that person as mentally ill.
Yeah.
So that's, I kind of have a, like, on one hand, and this is just me being open and honest, like, on one hand, that argument does make sense to me, the C.S. Lewis argument.
Yeah.
That's the one way where I can conceptualize this kind of hell that people would stay for. I still don't think infinitely, because, again, I think God's love never ends, never fails, so, like, he will wait however long.
Mercy endures forever.
Yes, exactly. So I don't think it makes sense to think that there's no end to it.
Yeah.
But on the
other hand,
it makes no sense to me. Because, like, I mean, again, in earthly terms, if somebody's choosing the harmful thing for them, we label them as mentally disturbed, mentally ill.
Yeah.
Would God do that?
Right.
Like, it doesn't sound...
Yeah, exactly. And I think that... so here's an example that I use from time to time when I think about this, or, like, when I talk about it with people sometimes, is... and this isn't original to me. I heard it from someone else. I think it was Eric Reitan that laid this example out. But when we're talking about free will, what is your will tied to? Is it not what we're actually talking about? Is your desire, right? When we say that we have free will, you have the freedom to do what you want, right?
Yeah.
So
where does that want come from?
Well, that's one thing, but so let me lay out 2 examples here.
All right.
2 scenarios. So you have 2 doors, and the first scenario, you don't know what's behind each door. There's door A, door B. Total mystery of what's behind each door in scenario number 1. In scenario number 2, door A has a check for $1 million. Door B has a ravenous lion with a taste for human flesh.
Nice.
Right? So if we're talking about free will, is your freedom to choose what you actually want, are you more free to choose with the ignorance of option 1, of scenario 1, or the clear and complete conception of your real choices, your real options in scenario number 2?
Right.
Obviously, you're more free to choose what you actually want if you know.
Right, yeah. If you have the most information available to you.
Exactly. So, and Paul says, the thing I want to do, sometimes I don't do it. The thing that I don't want to do, sometimes I find myself doing.
Oh, wretched man that I am.
Oh, wretched man that I am. So to me, for what that example points out to me is that there is a certain level of like you said, the ridiculousness of the idea that you're actually choosing something that you actually want, like that you're not in some way, that you have a clear view of what you're actually choosing. Like there's obviously is deception at work. There's something. It's because you don't understand what you're actually choosing that anyone would ever choose hell in the first place. Yeah. If it's a legitimate option, the only reason you're choosing it is because you have mistaken it for some sort of good, or you're just ignorant of the fact that it is actually not the good.
Right.
Yeah. And that, I think that demonstrates that scenario, those 2 scenarios demonstrate that clearly, I think.
Yeah, I think it goes, back to what I said earlier about like, did you ever really truly believe that? Because if you did, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like if you really truly did, then you would think what's behind door A and door B. Then why would you choose door B? It makes no logical, makes no sense.
Right. No rational being with the correct information and without there being any sort of like, because the Bible tells us we will see him. Every eye will see him. And I believe that every day, or there is a day in which everyone will see him, and will see him for who he truly is, without deception. Any lie that you've believed, any false gospel that's been preached to you, anything that someone has told you about him that's not right, you will see him for who he really is one day. And when you see him, and you know that he is the good, the beautiful, the true, the way, the truth, the life, whenever you see that without any deception, without any reason to believe that this option over here is actually good for you, game over.
Irresistible.
And isn't that what we sing about all the time?
Exactly.
The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Man. It's overwhelming because you cannot resist it.
Yeah, if something is overwhelming, you cannot stand against it.
Exactly.
It will overtake you. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, man.
Well, we've been going for some time.
Yeah, listen, bro, I am so tired.
I mean, we knew what we were getting into when we started this.
I did know what we were getting into.
And
really, we could talk about this topic forever. But, It is way past my bedtime.
Yeah. So you want to save the rest of it for later?
The rest of it, what else you got for us?
We didn't even scratch the surface of the Bible, bro.
Oh, the Bible.
I mean, it's kind of important.
Yeah, I guess. All right. Really, I am good. We're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Go ahead, but you're going to have to lead because I'm tired.
Yeah, man, I have so many notes on this that, like, there's so many other things that we could talk about here before we even got to Scripture. Maybe we do need to break it up into multiple segments. For those of you Bible nerds who are like, oh, but the Bible says, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, so guess what? Just listen to the next episode.
We're Bible nerds too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
We care what it says.
And this time I will come with notes, because if we're going to specifically talk about the Bible, I feel like I should probably have some Bible notes.
Probably a good idea.
Anyway,
all right, then.
Nerds.
Until next time, bye-bye.
Later.